Wayne, are you there?
Yeah. Well, I can hear you. I can't see you yet.
I don't know if you want to see me. I don't look like I used to look, but I do have a camera. There you go.
Dan,
How are you doing, Wayne?
I'm doing okay. How about you?
Well, I can't complain. It's a wonderful Mother's Day in sunny Southern California.
Yeah, well, I'm sorry to take you away from any celebration that you were involved with if that was happening yet.
We did a little this morning for my wife. We'll do a little more in the evening when other son shows up for dinner.
Uh-huh. Well, it's nice to see you. Let me just make a quick introduction. I have the good fortune today to speak with my old friend Danforth Lincoln. And Dan, tell us about your name. First of all, most people would see Dan Lincoln and say, well, it must be Daniel. So what's the derivative of that
This is
derivation?
Well, this is something that does happen to me a lot, actually. My grandfather, my dad's father was Danforth Lincoln. It apparently is a last name in our family. Going back a bunch of generations, there were Danforths, and somebody decided, I guess it would make a good first name. I think we had a vice president who went by the name Danforth at one point too. So,
Very cool.
but you are right. Even my brother screws up sometimes, calls me Daniel. So do happen.
Now, Dan, you came to, I hope you don't mind. I'm gonna call you Dan.
Please do. The only
Okay.
judges call me Danforth, and my mom when I'm in trouble.
Isn't that typical, right?
Yes, indeed.
Does she add your middle name too?
That's another family name. Yeah, Forbes. It's quite a mouthful, actually.
Yeah, I guess so.
But you know what? There are many Mowglis, and I always loved that at the Howells. These kids that we called Fred and Johnny, and it's Frederick Livingston Stanley the Fourth. Think names like that. There's an awful lot of these fancy names going back to the Mowgli days.
Yeah. So you came to Mowgli in 1970, I believe it was, right?
Yes, I did.
And
For two years of
how
Cubs.
did that happen?
Uh, it was kind of an interesting story. Grew up in Massachusetts, and my dad would always talk about this summer camp that he had been to, and I didn't know much about it. We had no idea what that was like growing up south of Boston. Took my brother and I up to New Hampshire to Supple Glide to hear the stories of Supple Glide and ride the rock down into the pond, which we dutifully did. And then he took us by the camp and explained that he had worked there. My dad was a watermaster in the well, it was a long time ago. I couldn't remember the exact years, but he was the watermaster for 2 or 3 summers under Colonel Elwell. And I think we got to meet Mr. Hart, my brother and I, and the Jungle House. It was all very formal and discussion is, do you think you might like to come here next summer? I'd never seen anything like this place, and I was super, absolutely excited to do it. My brother was a year too young, so he didn't join until later. But yeah, it just seemed like a really neat thing to do.
And now, where in Massachusetts was home?
We were from the South Shore,
The South
Norwell,
Shore. What town?
Norwell,
Norwell.
between
Okay. Yeah,
Situate and Hingham, Marshfield.
yeah, yeah. Huh.
So lived there for a number of years.
My
So,
mom was a Taunton girl.
mhm.
So, yeah. And I
And
used to go through that area. When I was in college, I would, on occasion, hitchhike down to Martha's Vineyard for the weekend and camp on the beaches back when you could do that.
and did you bring your guitar with you? Of
Of course.
course you did.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. And I see yours is right behind you, or one of them.
Well, and there's a reason that it is too. I have to personally thank you for creating a love not of pop music and specifically guitar. I very much remember, Wayne, when you were a young and fresh counselor, you cruising around the camp with that acoustic guitar of yours playing songs. And I swear I thought that was the coolest thing in the world. You'd be making up lyrics to popular tunes. So I remember specifically you did, I don't remember what it was all about. There was something relatively topical, but you rewrote the words to Bye Bye Miss American Pie. And you sang that to the whole camp. Wayne, that was the neatest thing in the world. And I thought to myself, I wish I could do something like that someday. And I ended up taking music as a hobby, and now I do. I do play in front of people,
Oh,
have
you
a
do.
band and stuff. But honestly, I have to thank you for that because you started that, and it's very much of a Mowgli thing, right? To get up and sing in front of people.
Yep.
That's a that's it just I have such fond memories of stuff like that.
Yeah. Yeah. So your dad was Watermaster, and
He
he didn't
was.
come as a camper though, right? He just,
Don't believe he did.
yeah.
I
Huh.
don't know. I don't know what got him his first connection. I guess he knew somebody who knew somebody, and he got the job there. And I think he was at Cornell at the time.
Wow. So and you spent you were in Cubs for 2 years, did you say?
2 years in Cubs. I think that's right.
What do you remember of those years? I'm really going to ask you to think back here.
Wow.
Do you remember
Well,
who the parents were?
oh wow. I don't, and that's horrible, isn't
No,
it?
that's not horrible. It's
But I remember, I'm trying to remember who was in Cubs with me, and I don't know if it was both years, but that made it all the way. Amos Levy was a Cub with me. Morgan Reese was a Cub with
oh,
me, and he made it all the way through. Gosh, I don't remember who everybody else was that I want to say Tom Wood was a Cub and made it all the way through. Hmm. Wow. I'm trying to remember the names of guys that were there. Okay. Andy Foraker.
Andy Foraker.
Remember,
Wow.
you know all these names. Wayne, you knew us all. You
Yeah,
were you were you were all over back in those days.
yeah,
And I'm sure there were others, and anybody who's listening and I didn't think of your name, I'm sorry. I do have howls I could have cheated, but these are the ones that just popped into my brain.
right, right. And do you remember anything about uh, your experience as a Cub? I mean, anything that really like pops to mind?
I do. You know, it's really interesting. I was a pretty young kid, as of course all the Cubs are, and this was a big adventure. And I'm sure that this is the case for a lot of people who went to Mowgli. There's a huge leap of faith leaving mom. And by the way, happy Mother's Day to all the moms. But leaving mom as a little kid to be away for 2 months. And I remember it was kind of scary to do it, but then I never felt scared when I got here. But the idea of what, might be, you just didn't know. You had no idea as a little kid what this would be like. But I mean, I just immediately had a group of best friends, and I did not have an older brother. So to me, suddenly a camp full of older brothers, people to emulate, people to look up to. As a cub, this was a big deal, and I know we were kept separate most of the time. So we often did our own things, and then occasionally we were brought into the pack. But I just remember it was also exciting. It felt like a major step in growing up. That's my remembrance of the
Yep,
Cubs. I do remember our Cub parents were wonderful, but I don't remember their names.
it's all right. That I think it's that first year, especially if you're a Cub or in the younger dorms, is much harder on the moms than it is on the kids.
Mhm.
It-
Oh,
it-
you're absolutely right, Wayne. Look, it's very clear that Camp Mowgli figured out what young boys need, and the formula works exceptionally well. The just the right level of activities for kids based upon their age group to help them grow up and to learn to take care of themselves. That's to me anyway. There's just so much of it. I mean, I could gush about the camp for hours. It means that much to me.
Sure. So, the moving down from Cubland in 2 years later, or 3 years later, I guess it would be.
I think so,
Um,
yeah.
you moved into the pack. Was that like a big deal to you, or?
It was the first in my life of graduating to something. It was a significant event. As Cubs, we were very sheltered. We went everywhere in a line. I remember that. We're always lined up. I mean, other than to get food at school, we didn't line up for lots of things as little kids, but here we went everywhere in a line. And so, yeah, we're in Tumai. We're freed from the line. We're allowed to roam about the camp, this big, wonderful place that mostly we had just sort of trailed through as like little ducklings, from point A to point B. Now we were allowed to wander around the camp, and it was so much bigger and so much more interesting. All these things places to poke around and explore, places that we'd been in for a few minutes here or a few minutes there. Oh, it made a huge difference. You did feel all grown up at least for a little while till you suddenly realize you were the youngest group in the pack, and then suddenly you didn't feel as grown up. But again, it was a wonderful experience. I mean, you think 8 weeks is a long time, except about the seventh week when you think summer's almost done, boys. And I spent the entire winter just looking forward to coming back for the next summer. But it was a Tumai was great. I had some, wonderful experiences, and I can't remember whether it was Tumai. It was either Tumai or it was Baloo, and you know, a little bit they blend together. But I have a specific remembrance of, I want to say it was Roger Smith reading us The Hobbit during relax. That as a kid, right, you have to read, but the books didn't mean anything to me. But when it was Roger Smith reading us The Hobbit, gave me a love for literature because he read it really well. The story came to life. Of course, you become a huge fan of Lord of the Rings after that too. But I remember that was either Tumai or Baloo anyway.
Yeah,
Uh,
yeah. Oh,
and I guess I
he
don't
was
remember which year that was though.
he was great at that, though.
Hmm.
No, people used to talk about that, and I've done quite a few of these at this point, and never had the opportunity to mention the whole idea of the count off.
Mm.
Particularly when you're out hiking somewhere, and the counselor would holler out, "Count off!"
1, 2, yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
we did, yeah, all
and,
through.
and that way they would be able to keep track of you even if you were out of sight. Yep.
Yes. Yes, that's true. Again, part of what was really an incredibly well-developed system. I mean, we're sending off very young boys out into the woods.
Right.
And I don't know, we typically didn't lose them. So,
Thankfully.
yeah.
Do you remember anything about early trips?
Do I remember? Oh, I certainly remember a war canoe trip when I was little. It probably would have been Cubs that we did the war canoe, or it may have been two
Maybe,
mile. It
or
was like,
maybe even Tumai. Yep.
yeah, out to Bell Island or Cliff Island. That was neat. So cool. I was an opportunity for a young kid to participate in the moving of the boat. I mean, I sat in boats that did stuff before, but now we were actually propelling the boat, and it seemed like it was so far away. You didn't think you'd make it there. Like a week later, maybe we'll arrive at the island, but it didn't take that long to get there. And I remember running around on the island. I had never in camping there that I'd never done anything like that. That was a super trip. Yeah, I love the water. Kind of grew up on the water. our house was near water, and I loved that. That was a really neat early trip. And then, I think my probably the next most memorable one would have been whatever was my first trip up Mount Cardigan. Because everybody always talked about Mount Cardigan and at the camp, and it's got such a wonderful view, and the view of the area around the camp when you finally get to the top and the fire tower. And that would again probably have been a two-my trip, I suspect. I don't know if the Cubs made Cardigan in those days. I have no way to recall specifically, but I know it was one of the earlier trips, and that was fascinating. Um, Love the trips up there at that. Suddenly you crest through the trees, and you've been listening to the birds as you're climbing up there, and you get up onto the rocks at the top, and you get to look forward to a, what do we call it, monkey meat sandwich.
Right, right.
What is that? I still to this day I don't know what the monkey meat was. I know it's
I
not
think
a
it was
monkey.
just ground up ham, but
Could have been ham, like a spam kind of thing, maybe that could be. But
yeah.
yeah, it either a monkey meat sandwich or a PB&J, and an orange and a chocolate bar. I mean, if you want to incent little kids to do anything, piece of candy was a good is it was a pretty good tool. But I remember going up there. I remember we could climb a little bit up the fire tower at the top of Cardigan that time, and get an even better view. So I very much remember that specific trip. That was a very special one. And it's something that I do like to get back to New Hampshire every number of years. And I would love to get up Cardigan again just because of the great memories that had. So that would have been one of the earlier trips that I remembered. And I'm trying to remember we had such a hodgepodge collection of vehicles to get us there. I'm remembering, I'm remembering these old giant like 18 passenger vans, and then there was a
The big black truck.
black steak truck, whatever we called that. Who'd pile us into that.
Yeah,
Yeah, that was a bunch of fun.
it was mostly called Bob Bankston's truck.
Okay.
Over
Yeah.
the years, I think.
Yes, I do. But I do remember all us piling into that. And that was a bunch of fun. So there's one of my earliest trip experiences. And what was it? I'm remembering something that from, and I don't think this was an early one, but it would have been maybe more in the Baloo Aquila time. Wayne, and you were taking us somewhere, and again, so many mountains blend into this and that because we didn't even know what mountain we were going to, mostly till we got there. It's like you're going hiking today, or you're going canoeing today, or whatever you're doing today on trip day, and so we didn't remember most of them. But I do remember you were and correct me if I'm wrong here, but you have a bit of Native American ancestry, and you were telling us a little about that. Am
Yeah,
I remembering that correctly?
look here. I've
Okay,
finally decided to go full native these days.
very nice. But I do remember you telling us about that, and you taught us some words, and again, fascinating trip, you
Yeah.
know, and we had, again, climbed another mountain. We always seem to make it to the top. That's kind of the Mowgli way.
Well, I actually looked at the Howl from 1975 yesterday, and you were in that, and Andy Poppinchock was the trip master, I believe.
Yes.
Here. Uh,
Hmm.
Tell me about some of the other staff that particularly left an impression on you.
Well, Andy Poppinchock would have absolutely been one of the ones. Again, we let little kids play with axes. But I mean, I say that, but then the answer is we're really well trained on how to use them and how to respect them, how to keep them sharp and maintain them. And he was the consummate woodsman. Absolutely. And you could watch the stuff that he would do and learn. It was funny after Mowgli talking to some of my my friends after I had graduated, and they were doing things in Boy Scouts, and they're like, "Oh yeah, they're letting us use a hatchet," and I'm going, "Yeah, I learned how to sharpen both ends of a Hudson Bay axe and drop a tree, and it had to land within a certain thing for me, it's a big tree, and I had to chop it up and earn my orange ribbon, and stuff like that." Andy Poppinchock, fantastic there. Tripmaster, yeah, his trips were always interesting, exciting. He was a great counselor. I had some good memories of him. Who else do I remember? Well, I mean, the quiet guidance of Mr. Hart, always from the entire time. I mean, he was Akela, he was Mowgli, the Mowgli, everything about Mowgli during my period of time there. Let me think of some of the other ones. Well, one of my many favorite counselors was, of course, Gary Wright at the rifle range.
Uh-huh.
What a character! What a great guy! Um, a love and respect of guns and shooting, not to be afraid of them, but to learn to respect them. And what a great friend too. I mean, he's a guy that I haven't spoken to him in a number of years. I hope he's still well, but he used to call every once in a while and we would catch up. But Gary Wright, fantastic counselor, just always seemed to be wonderful and caring. And I can say this too, is that the counselors at Mowgli, they all seemed like they were really well chosen to be interesting, neat people. I mean, just really nice people with interesting hobbies, and you'd learn so much about people from the people that ended up being counselors there. I guess it was Mr. Hart who had the ability to find them and pick them, but he was great. And some great crew coaches we had through the years. I mean, gosh, you mentioned Bob Bankston. He wasn't counseling at the time, but he was always around in the shop, keeping the place going. And I remember his brother Rick. That's one of my
Yeah.
favorite
Rick.
counselors, Rick Bankston. Now, as I'm remembering, I think Rick was a camper when I was in Cubs, but he became staff by the time I got down into the pack.
Uh-huh.
So I'm thinking that's about right, about the
Yeah.
right timing. But he was again somebody that was very memorable. Um,
Charlie Walbridge.
oh, I was going to say I only had a couple of years, but Charlie Walbridge, the inspiration for canoeing and stuff like that. Oh my goodness, yes, I remember Charlie Walbridge. As a little kid, he seemed like he was the tallest man in the world. And he could make a canoe go upside down and turn it right side up again.
Yeah.
And you could do that too. I remember you were pretty good at that too. But that was a pretty cool skill to have if you could do it.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I couldn't do it today, but my son is a very fearless paddler. Charlie, when if he's around, he's living out in Colorado now, but
Hmm.
when he used to be around in New Hampshire, he would go and help Charlie Walbridge do his canoeing demonstration, and Charlie would have him roll a kayak with his hands,
Hmm.
drop his paddle and roll it with his hands, and he could do that. I could never do that.
Well, it's no, it was fantastic. And again, a love of canoeing. I had to get my red ribbon after watching his demonstration of that. Uh, it was our sailing instructor. I want to say it was like Nat Hemingway. He was
Yeah,
very good, taught me a love of sailing. So many things that I enjoy doing. Um, it's because we had fantastic counselors who obviously clearly loved what they were teaching and their love of something was infectious.
yeah. Well, this year we lost Stu Klein, but
I do remember Stu Klein.
yeah,
I, was he
he was
was he the
craft shop.
assistant director at one
Yep,
point? It was Craft
yep,
Shop too. Yeah,
that's right.
yeah.
Yep.
I do remember Mr. Klein. He was a great guy, and I had fun in the craft shop too. And well, we are getting older.
Well, that's something that you can still do a little bit of.
Mhm.
Yeah, he was quite the iconoclast, Stu Klein.
Yes. Yeah, he struck me as someone who probably had some great stories to tell that weren't Mowgli stories. But I bet he lived a really interesting life outside of the camp. But he was a great counselor, really.
Yeah, he did. I had a really nice conversation with him a few years ago, and he told me some of the funniest stories about, when Junior Bender first came to Mowgli.
Hmm.
Well, Mr. Hart asked Stu to go down to New York City to meet him, uh, because he was flying in from Piney Woods, Mississippi.
Hmm.
And and so Stu would laugh about the fact that this little short Jewish guy and an African American kid were wandering the streets of New York for a couple of nights together.
I remember Junior Bender. Great guy. Again, one he was older than me by a few years, so one of the people that you looked up, fantastic athlete.
Yep.
Just a nice guy too. Everybody
Yeah.
loved, very popular guy.
Yeah. Was there a trip that really stands out for you as far as
Well, let me think about this. There was a trip that we did uh in gosh, it probably would have been Aquila or Panther. And it was to a mountain range that wasn't the presidentials, but it was like right at the presidentials. We didn't climb Mount Washington, but we're like
mm,
right around there. I think we went up Boot Spur, but didn't go up Mount Washington.
uh,
But it was a it
oh
was a
yeah.
it was a trip we did there, and we ended up camping up on the ridge. And I remember this, and I remember hanging out. We're all sleeping out under the stars, and I'm pretty sure that was the trip. I remember hanging out with Eric Adele and George White, and we're looking at the stars, and it was during, I want to say, the Perseid meteor showers. And
Uh-huh.
we could sit there watching meteors. We were, thousands of feet in the air on a beautiful, clear night with no light pollution. And so you could see the entire Milky Way. This is not something that you normally could see, right? But
Right,
we're there
right.
staring at it and looking at shooting stars everywhere. Wow, that was kind of mind blowing. I want to say it was that trip, but it might
Yeah.
have been a
Yeah.
different one. It's right around then. That
Huh.
pretty memorable.
So was George in your dorm?
George White was in my dorm. And in fact, it's funny too, because Eric, who had been a friend of mine, Eric Adele had been a friend of mine before Mowgli, and we grew up on the same street. And Eric, I think, is still living in the Massachusetts area. George is out here in California, which is where I am.
Oh, is that right?
Eric was gonna this was only about a year ago. Eric had some business trip that was supposed to happen out here, and he was gonna try to get George and I together, and we both agreed we would do it, and his trip got canceled. But I guess, Eric, if you're listening to this at some point, make that trip happen. I think George and I would love to see you again after all these years.
Yeah, well, I need to get him on the podcast too,
You should dig him up. Eric's got stories, and I'm sure that George does too.
Now, was Caleb George's brother?
His older brother,
Yeah,
Caleb's
okay.
older brother.
Yeah, I'll be darned. Yeah,
Hmm.
I'm thinking that trip that you're talking about was to the Montalban Ridge. Um,
Okay.
that was the name of the ridge where we, you know, you ended up going up Boot Spur at the very end of the trip.
Hmm.
Yeah, yeah,
Okay, I don't doubt it. But again, like I said, we wouldn't have known that. It's not like we were told 3 weeks in advance that we'd start thinking about it. We just
yeah,
here's
right.
we're taking off today. But it was an overnight trip.
Yeah.
I
And it was
want to say it was
backpacking trip, I think.
yes,
Yeah. So what
yeah.
was it like to graduate from trips when you were, doing base camp to actually spending time up in the mountains?
Well, that's what it was all about. After all, I mean, that's the whole idea, the idea of the happy wanderer that this you can actually, I mean, to a kid who grows up where I did, the fact that you can take stuff with you and live in the woods for a couple of days seemed impossible. But at Mowgli, you realize it's not only possible, but it's something you should expect to be able to do,
Yeah.
and you're going to be expected to do it. It was super neat. Again, we're little kids, so we have our backpacks and we're carrying stuff. But then again, we have, these counselors like Hercules carrying huge backpacks. I remember the Gehring brothers would carry like 500-pound backpacks up the mountain, it seemed like. Us little guys couldn't even pick them up, and they would just hike off with them. So, but it was again, that with the leadership that we had from our counselors, you never doubted that you could do it. You always knew you could because they knew you could, and they were always right. You could. It was to me that it was just one more confirmation of something that you start to learn at Mowgli, I think, at a very early age, which to me is that, the your ability to do stuff is not limited. If you set your mind to something, do the proper preparation for it, you can do almost anything. I got to tell you, I mean, that's a lesson that has served me well through my whole life. We often find ourselves in a situation we didn't expect to be in. You think about it, go, well, there's just one more adventure. We're going to do it, whatever the thing might happen to be. And hiking, carrying all your food with you, that was just one more thing, just like that.
Right. Yeah. This, I mean, the confidence building
Yeah.
that Mowgli instills is extraordinary.
Now, Wayne, when you went to Mowgli, you were pretty grown up. I feel like you might have been your den year was my first cub year, or you had just graduated, but you
69 would have been my den year, so it would have been the year
year
before you.
before.
Yeah.
So did you start as a cub? Did you go
I
through the
did.
whole
I
thing?
did. My mom was the nurse. That was how I came to Mowgli, originally back in 1963.
Mm.
So yeah, I started out there, and then she was there for 4 years as the nurse, and then Bob Bankston's mom.
Yes, I
Banks.
do remember Mrs. Bankston was the nurse during most, if most of the time that I was there.
Yeah, yeah.
And then was their youngest Craig? It was
Craig.
like Craig was a couple years older than me, I think.
Uh-huh.
I'm remembering the Bankston. It's amazing. These names are starting to pop back into my head
Sure.
after all these years.
Yeah, there was a guy, one of the other guys that I noticed that we hadn't, I think he only came to Mowgli 1 year, and his name was Merle. Do you remember him? He was a nature counselor. Uh,
Merle. What
Ch-
would his last name have been? I would have known
his
him as
last
Mr.
name
Something.
was Chase. Miss.
Chase.
So anyway, I happened to notice his photograph, uh, so it came to mind, and I hadn't asked anybody about him, so I didn't know. What other industries were you particularly interested in?
Well, hmm. I guess the ones that interested me, I guess the most, the ones we've sort of talked about.
Yeah,
Axemanship, sailing, and canoeing were just three very traditional Mowgli things. Were very much at the top of my list. I'm remembering learning a bit about weather. We did have that for a while, and I'm trying to remember. Gosh, who was the counselor? I want to say it was Perry Smith.
that
Uh,
makes, yes, Perry Smith did teach weather.
So that was interesting. I mean, it turns out you do need a weatherman to know which way the wind blows sometimes. I'm sure you'll appreciate the Dylan reference, uh,
Absolutely.
but other ones that I mean, those were. I guess I should have dug up my hat. I do still have my Mowgli hat
You
with
do? You
my
still have your hat?
do have my hat. Yes. I don't have an awful lot of souvenirs from back in the day. I have a couple of howls that somehow I put them in a safe place, but they still managed to pick up stains. Don't know how. But I do still have my Mowgli hat.
Um,
So but there were a couple of other ones. Riflery. I mean, again, with Gary,
yeah.
that was a big thing. A super fun thing to do. When I was a kid, and I have a good love for the rifle range, and I'm pleased that the camp allowed us. I mean, little kids got to play with guns. I mean, we didn't play with them, but we get to shoot them. I mean, they stop being scary when you understand they're just a tool
Right.
that that does a job. Um, I mean, I'm remembering, in terms of activities that were fun, one of my most fun things was trail clearing. That was fun. Getting one of those lively lads, getting that thing swinging, you could, man, you could work up a good sweat, and it was a very rewarding and satisfying feeling when our trip master, Mr. Poppinchock or whoever it was, had taught us how to sharpen these things up so they were razor sharp, and you could knock off almost a three-quarters of an inch sapling with that thing, you
Yep.
know, and keep the trails clean. That was good. Um, I did enjoy craft shop stuff. Love to build stuff. That was always fun. It probably a follow on from when I was a little kid and my dad brought home Legos. So craft shop was like the next step past that. It's that was fun. I
I'm trying to remember, we were talking about Stu Klein. Did
yes.
was there a costume night in the years when you were there on a Saturday?
This did happen a couple of times. I want to say I don't know that it was an every year, but yes, I do remember. I do remember making elaborate costumes at various points in time.
Yeah.
We used to have what was there was like a room in Gray Brothers that had costumes and stuff in it
Right. It
that you
was
could use as the
the
basis for
green
whatever.
room. The green
Yeah,
room, they called it. Yep.
that's the place.
Yep.
Yeah, that was neat. It always smelled of mothballs.
Yes,
It's
it
right next to the lending closet, right? We had the
right.
lending closet where you could loan people sweaters because who has a giant gray sweater with an M on it? It's not something you find in everybody's closet at the time.
Right, right. Yeah.
But
Uh,
yes, we did costume night. That was fun. I mean, the whole idea of a dormitory getting up and doing skits together. That was a really big, neat thing. Again, helps the young boy with the whole idea of uh, public performance or even public speaking, which
mhm.
again has been helpful for me in my life anyway. So, you just have an innate confidence to do stuff like that.
Yeah. Uh, s- um, so uh what about your older years at Mowgli, Panther and Den? You particularly do you have particular memories about that?
I do. By the time you get into Panther and Den, you've got a group of friends who have been coming back for years, that you really you get close to. I mean, and yeah, I I mean it was I you become mm, a role model for the younger kids at that point. You're somebody that I don't somewhere along the way you start to realize that just as you when you were a little kid, you were looking up to these older kids going, "Wow, I want to be like that guy. He's so cool," and that kind of stuff. And suddenly you realize that there's people that are looking up to you a little bit, and
Right.
it gives an interesting, unique perspective. You suddenly go, "Wow, people are paying attention. I need to make sure I really am the person that I'm supposed to be, and being a good role model because I've had so many of them here at Mowgli myself. I'd like to follow in that tradition. I do remember, that it was sort of an awakening particularly by the time you're in Den, um, you know, and we had a good Den, but it was always the funnest dorm, it turns out, down there. And I do remember a lot of my den year. It's just great guys that I'd been with for years. It was always an interesting thing. You'd come back for camp. This is in the days before we had all the social media. I don't know if Mowgli kids now are all on Facebook friends, but there was nothing like that.
Mm.
You'd come back and you'd be like, gosh, I hope my friends all come back this year. So it
I
was
think they do that stuff after camp, but you know, at camp there's no devices.
No, of course not. Of
No
course not.
devices.
But you might know at Christmas that your friends were reaching out saying, "Hey, I'm coming back this year."
Right?
Yeah, me too. That whole thing to be able to be excited about that. I remember showing up and you start looking around as people are all arriving on the arrival day and you're like, "Oh, there's somebody I know." And the people would get in there, you come into your dorm and you go, "Oh, I recognize his tennis racket. This guy's back." That kind of stuff. Um, but I really, I guess it was a feeling of responsibility by then. We were often, I think ended up being a Mrs. Holt's Day speaker and things like that. It was a level of responsibility that if you're going to be here another year, you'd be on the staff. So Den is very much of a transitional year from being a carefree camper to feeling like a responsible, like mini adult, I suppose.
Yeah. Well, Mr. Hart was very good at emphasizing for the Denites the importance of being role models for the other kids.
Yes,
That's
he was. Absolutely. Well, I feel like he was the ultimate role model himself. So,
sure. Yeah. Yeah. He was just an amazing guy.
yeah. Yeah, Crew Day always got more and more exciting, especially as we got older. You talk about because now you're rowing in the higher forms. That was always something. I was just a huge fan of Crew Day. And I always wondered how the staff found stuff to put in the bonfire. Do they still have bonfires? Are those still allowed?
Oh yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. Those are the huge bonfire in the middle of Gray Brothers Field. I think it was this is whoever came up with the idea of the Burning Man Festival must have either met somebody or gone to Mowgli. The whole idea of this big giant thing that
Yeah.
we do there.
So crew was important.
Oh, absolutely so.
That's
Absolutely so. It's interesting how it splits the camp into two teams, and we have our battle, and then it's all over, and we all come back together again. It was neat, but I remember the parades, the drums beating. I think Red had a real drum, Blue Crew had an oil can, a big one of those big 40-gallon oil drums.
yeah.
Um, and then I don't know who was responsible for this at the time, but some staff, probably junior staff people, would create the what was it, the Scarlet Journal and the Blue Banner. We had
Right.
our we had our big poster board newspapers that would come out a couple times during the cruise season with great stories that were all political hyperbole about the racing crews and stuff. And that was pretty neat too. I remember that, but I always remember the parades and stuff that we had. It was a very exciting time.
Yeah. Yeah. Uh,
Super neat.
it's amazing to me that you know a place where the whole emphasis is on the community and the group that you could split them up for that 1 week
Mhm.
and it would be, I mean, they'd be just screaming at each other
Oh yeah, yeah.
and then they would just like come right back together. It was like physics.
I always wonder, Wayne, was that a social experiment or is that just something that just worked out?
Yeah.
But it did. Mowgli, such a microcosm of things, though, because but I loved it. I absolutely loved that. The crew week was just a fantastic thing. But when it was over, it also started to mark, now we're getting to the end of the season,
Yeah.
too. Remember that, too.
Right. Yeah.
Now, and it is my recollection, we don't do 8-week seasons anymore, right?
Or
That summer
7 weeks now. Yeah.
should have gone to 9, not 7.
Yeah, I'm not really sure. There was sort of a conspiracy between Onaway, Pasquani, and Mowgli over that
Mm.
change that happened, and I think I wasn't really around when when they went from 8 weeks down to 7 weeks, but um, yeah, I think it had a lot to do with the fact that schools were going back earlier.
Yeah, different schedules, and I mean, I suppose as a parent, you do want to see your kid for a week at the beginning and another week at the end before they're off to school. So,
Now, what
but
about your life well, did you come back as a staff member?
no,
Okay.
no, I didn't. I don't know, and I don't remember why. I'm sure I had something that was horribly important to do that next summer, and I can't remember what it was. So I guess I blew it. I should have. I would have I would have loved to have been able to pass forward some of the life things that I learned at Mowgli, but he did not come back as a
Yeah.
staff. So
So tell us a little bit about you know uh, not only what you did after you came back or after your early years at Maui, but about your life.
well, managed to managed to make it through high school and college. Ended up going to graduate school and I ended up being a lawyer. So
And
I'm,
what kind of law do you practice?
uh,
Are you,
business. It's primarily business
uh-huh.
law. I did litigation for a number of years, and many of my litigation clients turned into corporate type clients. So I do a sort of a mix of a bit of business litigation when companies get in disputes. Also, subsequently have become general counsel for a medical device company that we're
Oh,
hoping to change the world of medicine. It's a telemedicine device called the MedWand, and I'm their general counsel. With it allows a doctor to take a remote examination of a patient from somewhere else. So if you had
wow.
a MedWand and I were your doctor, I could literally get vital signs from you through the
Wow.
internet. It's kind of neat,
Yeah.
particularly as our generation are aging, and we love the idea of being able to see our doctors. So that, regardless of where we are. So
Hmm.
I'm doing that. I'm a lawyer. I got a wife, 3 kids, living in Southern California. I think you came out here once.
I
You
came to your
us,
house,
right? Yeah, you've been here.
but I don't know if you're still living in the same place, but
Yeah, I think I am actually. I've been here for this house for 26 years or so. So yeah,
probably
very
was, yeah,
one.
yeah, it was probably the same place. What town
Mhm.
is that?
It's called Rancho Santa Margarita.
Rancho Santa
Just
Margarita.
a little bit south of where Mickey Mouse lives in Orange County, Disneyland. So
Uh,
people are, well, where's Orange County? It's where Disney picked. So
yeah, yeah.
anyway, but yeah, I've been doing that. And obviously, the thought of retirement is starting to loom one of these days. Now, as I think about this, I was the den of 76, so next summer would be, I guess that's kind of a milestone, isn't it? That would be 50 years,
Oh,
right?
yeah, yeah.
Am I
You
remembering that right? Is that
start
is that
planning.
the math? If
It's
that's true, shout out to Den of 76. Maybe we all ought to come back next
yeah,
year for Crew Day.
yeah, yeah. Well, we'll start working on them all.
Yeah. I don't know how many you have. As I said, I do sort of have tabs on Eric Adele and George White. I know I spoke to Pete Gassarero and Morgan Reese both not more than about 5 or 6 years ago.
Wow.
I kind of lost track of most of everybody else.
Yeah.
But any of you all who are in Southern California,
Right.
tell Wayne, and I'd love and get me your number through Wayne
Yeah.
because love
That's
to see my old friends. I mean, how it is, and you know this, Wayne, probably since you talk to so many people. Mowgli's can get together and talk for hours about all the stuff. I mean, the minutia of stuff that we remember.
yeah.
And
Yeah.
I mean, it's so much what it was about the camp. Just the smell of the camp, and I have come back several times through the years when I've had an opportunity, and I've been in New England, and it wasn't just for, well, I'm here for a day and I have to go. But to come back and you close your eyes and you smell the camp, and it just a flood of memories that come
Yeah.
from.
Yep. My sister lives in Southern California. She's just outside LA. And so I've managed to get back a few times, but not much. I
Mhm.
mean, I remember really enjoying going to your place. It was fun.
Thank you. Yeah, that was we had a it, we had a few folks out there. Well, if Mowgli ever wants to do something like that again, if you want to try to get a nexus of something, I'm sure we could host a handful more again. So,
Yeah, we've got a quite a contingent out there in particularly in Southern California.
mhm.
Uh,
And you're still in New Hampshire, right? You were that you were almost a next door neighbor of the camp, is my recollection.
yeah, now I'm a couple hours away. My wife passed in 2018, and I sort of uh, found a place that I could afford up north because I had to downsize. And so I live in the town of Bath, Bath,
Hmm.
which is right on the Connecticut River. Very nice.
Okay.
Yeah, nice little town. But
And you come back to the camp regularly?
oh yeah, I try and make it to the various work weekends and things like that, and visit. But this is this is one of the ways that I pay it forward to do these, and I have to say it's always a joyful experience. Really
Well,
is. And no matter who you're talking to, I mean, I've interviewed a couple of fellas that were just out of Mowgli within the last 4 or 5 years, and it's but you get to see the various generations, which is kind of fun too.
mhm.
So, um, what do you think? I'm going to ask you the big philosophical question now, and that is, what do you think the impact of Mowgli has been, generally speaking, on the kind of person that you became?
That's easy. That is the ultimate, Groucho would say, the $64,000 question. Mowgli is the moral compass. That's and I've tried to explain this to people who don't know about Camp Mowgli, but it is, and for somebody in my profession, I'm an attorney. Honestly, we are supposed to be strong advocates of our client, but there, how do we say this? There's the world that I live in, there's a lot of gray areas.
Mm,
And one of the nice things about Camp Mowgli is it's always made it very easy for me to make decisions when I'm doing something. And my dad said this to me at one point, and he was right. I've heard I hear a lot of people that it's the WWJD. Well, it was
mhm.
Mr. Hart. What would Mr. Hart do? You never have a question in your mind. What should I do in this precarious situation? What would Mr. Hart do? Or if it's not, what would he do? If you choose this path, would you feel comfortable telling Mr. Hart that you did? You know, that was that's it. I mean, okay, the two biggest takeaways. The first one we talked about, the sense of I can do anything if I set my mind to it. I mean, within reason, of course, but things that can be done that you're not used to doing. That's a big deal. It's a self-confidence, and it's not a hubris. It's the knowledge I have done these things before, so I can do these things. But more than anything else, the big takeaway, it's the moral compass of what's expected of you, how to be a proper citizen in the world, how to be the kind of person that you're not ashamed to be, the kind of person that you want to be. Mowgli, there's so many shining examples of that in the staff and in other campers. I mean, just great people who went there, following in the examples that were laid out from years before,
Yeah,
over and over again. Honestly, Wayne, that's it. I mean, it's probably the reason why two Mowglis who might have been 20 years apart at the camp, and never knew each other or even any of the same, specifically the same people, could nevertheless talk about shared experiences, because we all were brought up with the stories and the things that we did. It just helped you to be that person. So for me, that and you couldn't put a price on the value of that.
Now, Dan Lincoln, you when I first asked you to do this, said to me, "Well, I don't know if I have that many things that I could talk with you about." And here we are, coming up on an hour, and we could talk for four more.
You could.
It's so great to see you, my friend. I hope to make a trip out your way this year, and I will plan on giving you a call and getting together. Maybe we could even play some music together.
That would be fun. I have several guitars, including an old Martin that you might want to play.
Oh, good.
But that would be fun. And thank you for having me, Wayne. And by the way, another treasure. When you did come out here last time, you had made an impression upon my daughter who was dancing, and you gave her a lovely photograph that you had done of ballerina slippers, which is on the wall in our house. And I love
How
that. And that was
nice.
kind to me of you that you did
Well,
that.
yeah,
We would love to see you. And
good.
like I say, Mowgli friends, come say hi.
You bet. Dan Lincoln, good hunting, my friend.
Good hunting to you, Wayne. And
You
thank you
take
for
care.
having me.
Thanks.